So now let's talk about how angels aren't born, they're made.
Oh,
And you wouldn't have any angels if you didn't have people doing the first step toward becoming an angel here in this world. The world is the seedbed of heaven.
quite a mind blower.
This is from Last Judgment 10. Humankind is the seedbed of heaven. That's what I just said.
Yeah. Wow.
Just as heaven has been formed from humankind thus far, that is, since the beginning of creation, so it will continue being formed and enriched from now on. Now, it is within the realm of possibility that humankind on a given planet could perish.
Okay. Yep.
Now,
Yep.
what do you, according to Swedenborg, what makes it so that humankind on a given planet could perish? I know a lot of people would think nuclear war,
It's pollution.
degradation of the biosphere.
Right.
What is it that causes humankind to perish? According to Swedenborg, this occurs if humankind completely separates itself from the divine. So the reason why Jesus had to come to earth, people had gotten so depraved that they were almost doing that. They were almost fully separated.
On the verge, yeah.
But even if humankind were to perish on one planet by separating itself from the divine, an outcome the Lord provides against,
Yes.
it would still continue on others.
Important clause in there.
Yeah.
This is not like you can just accidentally stumble into destroying the planet.
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
this-
there is a mechanism in place.
One
thankfully.
of the more whoa sounding ideas from Swedenborg, which we just did a whole show about, is that there's other planets full of people, and they too go to heaven. You go to heaven, you go to the afterlife, you meet people who didn't grow up on Earth.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's right. He says it's just very widely known in that other world.
So why start here? Why not just go right to heaven? If the point is the seedbed of heaven, why not to go right to heaven?
Right.
So we have to build here the basis for the kind of mind that can go live in heaven. The basis for the angelic mind has to happen here.
Mm.
This is from Secrets of Heaven. He says, this is how you build your angelic mind. This is how you be the right foundation for heaven, and how you equip yourself with the divine influence to go and be an angel after you die. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
We advance step by step from shallow to deep. As for instance, from knowledge to concepts truly understood. The shallower traits then serve as a foundation for something deeper.
Yeah, so that almost sounds like there's multiple foundations, almost like that egg thing that we've talked about sometimes, where each thing is an egg stage for something else that's going to hatch out of it, but that you get that foundation, and then it does seem like knowledge aggregates that way, doesn't it?
Again,
Like if you're learning to play a musical instrument,
Yeah.
first of all, you just got to learn the absolutely basic, like, oh, I hit this and it made a noise. And then you start to learn about the structure of music. And then more and more, it aggregates. But it's all that first bit of just like, this is how you make a noise, is still the foundation for the whole structure.
there's a non-zero chance, again, that everything we've said in this conversation is wrong. So I'm not trying to say this is so great.
That's right.
However, let's say that some of it is right. Most of the things we've been talking about, where we're trying to peer into understanding these very meaningful but mysterious and lofty Swedenborg concepts,
Yeah.
we're constantly using our earthly knowledge to try to understand them. So we're
Exactly.
sitting here talking about the inflow of heaven into earth by talking about, we mentioned how the microphone works, how the skin and the muscles and the bones work. It's all tangible stuff that we believe to understand from our lives that allows us to try to peek over that next fence at the spiritual things that we don't observe as readily directly. So that's happening in real time here.
That's actually happening during our show.
Continuing on, or going to a different part of Secrets of Heaven that's actually a little earlier. From infancy to adolescence, we are purely, so there's the process of development. From infancy to adolescence, we are purely sensory beings. We take in only earthly, bodily, and worldly information through our physical senses, and this information forms the basis of our thoughts and ideas. Okay? The connection with our inner self is not yet open, beyond the minimum needed for grasping and retaining information.
Because that's where grasping comes from. That's
Yes.
where comprehension. So for when a child sort of gets something,
Yeah.
you understand something you didn't understand before, that's coming, but still that inner self is not so developed yet, because that's part of the reason for the waiting room, right? That you're not just sort of waiting for your doctor's appointment. There's something that happens here that's essential to your development that can't happen there.
Yeah.
It just does go from the bottom up. That's how it works.
It takes 9 months just to get ready to be born. Just get to it. Just, okay, go for it. But if you've ever been waiting for a child to get here, now they tell you, oh, it's 1 week in, your baby is the size of a poppy seed, and it's something. Week 2, little paddle-like limbs, whatever.
It would be difficult to survive as a poppy seed.
Yes.
Like if you decide to skip pregnancy.
We're not trying to
just be born at a day old.
We're not trying to say the marsupial way of life is inferior to the
no slight to the wombats and kangaroos.
What I'm saying is, this is how it works. This is how complicated things work, especially the things that are alive work. It's actually anything. You build a building, you have to do certain things before you do other things. It's just the way material is. And so the point I'm trying to make with the pregnancy thing is that the reason why is every single day there's important things being done that have to be done at the speed at which they're being done, that makes it so that this thing can be a living, can hold life. So that's the same thing with after we're born and the angelic life that you're starting to build. You can't just do it all right away. It's got to, again, move at the pace it needs to move at. So these very complicated, very delicate things can happen. In this case, the opening of the inner self. The innocence we have at that stage is outward, not inward, because true innocence resides in wisdom. You get there once you've lived a whole life and can choose that innocence. The Lord uses this superficial innocence to bring into order what enters through our senses. Without the inflow of innocence from the Lord at that first stage of life, a foundation would never emerge on which to build an intellect or rational mind, the true mark of a human.
Now I love that, because just having sensory experience is not enough by itself. I never thought about it. I never thought about the role of innocence. It's an amazing passage. But so you're just being bombarded, and you're a little kid. This is the first time, you can see that little babies are often quite confused. Like what is happening? They don't know a human face from anything else yet.
Yes.
Later they get more where they look in your eyes or something. But it's first is just like, what is happening? It's just a chaotic thing. And the thought that this innocence, what a wild thing to say, is actually organizing. Because how would we know? Doesn't it seem a little bit above our pay grade to build a human being? I don't know how to do that. So how do you take this sensory experience? Okay, we'll put this here, put that there. That'll hold this support. Okay, we'll put this here, put that there, and then we can build this on top of there. Because what we're headed for is having, a teachable mind, and that, okay, so now we'll put some instruction in there, and then we'll get to the point where there's some rationality and understanding and wisdom and compassion, and other things will happen down the road.
We take it for granted that will develop.
Out of sensory experience, really, you're going to build that whole structure, like the whole thing is founded on the sensory experience.
Without fail, you go. So my wife teaches like 4 and 5-year-old kids, and now we're getting to the point where she'll say, "Oh, you see that full-on 22-year-old grown-up walking around?" I taught them when they were 4.
Yeah.
But without fail, you go talk to them now, and they have the mind of an adult, and that we just take for granted that happened. But it's incredibly complex. I love going back to the embryonic development analogy, because we're starting to be able to see the physical side of the complexity. So you can see What has to happen first is it starts with a single cell, and then it divides into 2, and then it divides into 4. And within each of those, I just say it divides. Like, it just divides.
Oh,
it divides. But actually, it has to go to anaphase, metaphase, telophase, whatever the other phase is, where the chromosomes line up in the middle, and these little microtubules go and latch onto them, and then pull it apart, and there's all this replication, and get the lipid there's just in those, just to divide those cells. You couldn't do that.
I know people who do nothing but study that, like what happens in embryos. They're PhD researchers, and they're just looking at what happens in there when that divides.
And they still couldn't, if you gave them some tiny little chopsticks or something to try to do that. They couldn't do it manually.
No.
So the development of the mind, which seems kind of wishy-washy, is exponentially more complex. And it is something that God is pulling these strings on, just as he does in the development through the order he's created of the embryo. That all has to happen, and you just like you need the womb environment in order for the fetus to develop. You need the physical world. You need us living in the physical world in order for the mind, the spirit to develop. That's what it's showing the process of here.
And the astounding thing is that there's a certain embryonic development that you can describe. I'm sure with your wife teaching that age kids, there's a thing about their artistic development. They draw this or they draw that, and there's a certain sequence.
Can you grip
that they
a
go
pencil?
Through.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And yet, they're all becoming different individuals, and that mind that's being built is more and more unique. Something's being constructed that's different than any other edifice that was ever constructed before or will
from eternity to eternity, right?
So that's you're talking about divine work there. That's not something that we can. Teachers help and parents and all that other stuff, but it's like something is going on here that's way beyond our understanding.
Here's how you start to build that mind. From adolescence to early adulthood, a line of communication with our inner earthly plane is opened up. How is it opened up? By lessons in decency, civility, and integrity, learned both from our parents and teachers and from our own studies.
That's interesting. These sort of moral feeling.
Not just anything opens that up.
It's not talking about math or something. It's
regrouping.
It's being a decent person to others, right?
Continuing on, throughout early adulthood, a line of contact between our earthly and rational planes is opened up by learning what is true and good in public and private life, and most of all in spiritual life, from hearing and reading the Word. So far as we then steep ourselves in goodness through truth, that is, so far as we act on the truth that we learn. Actually, spiritual ideas, which we would say, what's the difference between a spiritual idea like a theology, it's all just angels dancing on the head of the pin, it's just made up, it's not a hard science.
Right.
Those ideas are like some desperately needed enzyme in the creation of the mind. You've got it, or it's like some kind of nutrient that you can't manufacture, vitamin D, you got to get it from the sun or something.
Right.
Or from your diet. It goes on. So far that we act on the truth we learn, our rational level opens up. So far as we do not steep ourselves in goodness through truth, so far as we fail to act on the truth, our rational level does not open up. So it starts to become voluntary. Like, are you going to grow or are you not?
And it's not as if we really even have much of a clue what our earthly level, like, again, we're not doing this to ourselves.
Yeah.
We don't even understand what that is. But he's talking about multi-layered development that takes a long time. It takes a long time to cook a good human being, to prepare.
So this is talking about the development of an angelic mind. This is not talking about the development of a smart person. You can, according to Swedenborg, you can advance quite far. You could be renowned for your learning, but still be stuck at a stunted growth in terms of your moral development and your spiritual development.
You may be an amazing member of the debate society, and yet Swedenborg would not accuse you of having any rationality at all if you're not a decent, loving, compassionate person,
And
because that's what's rational to him.
that's what because that's the wise. Yeah, that's the point of life.
Yeah.
Is to be that. And if you've missed that boat, nobody can say you've got it figured out. Even if you can recall facts like crazy, or you can out-talk somebody.
And he says some things, doesn't he? That even all that learning just increases your insanity, or just, can make you a worse person, like more obnoxious.
Well, because that's how Swedenborg was. He's taken little shots at his former life.
That's right.
Where he had quite a great deal of worldly learning and
he was
awards,
a hotshot with all, yeah, right.
but yet he lacked the fundamental understanding of that what is good is to love being useful, and what is evil is to love your own eminence and pride.
Right.
He hadn't got that memo, but I mean, he had it to some extent, but it really became real for him.
Yeah.
In his early 50s. Okay, I don't think I read this. Our thoughts stay on the earthly level in our memory, and therefore on the threshold outside the house, so to speak, if we don't take this leap. At that stage in the next, so far as we undermine, deny, and violate goodness and truth, believing what is false and doing what is evil instead, our rational level shuts down, as does our inner earthly level. In the Lord's divine providence, we keep enough contact with the higher levels that we can still grasp what is good and true and understand it a little, but we cannot adopt it as our own unless we repent belatedly and then spend a long time wrestling with falsity and evil.
A long time.
Yeah. I think that's what I did. I think that's the route that I took.
Yeah.
We cannot adopt it. Yeah. So everyone has this to a certain extent, that there's a fork in the road where initially you just grow, your mind just grows. It grows to get to be somebody who can think and recall information and starts to develop the ability to reason. But whether we make it to the next spiritual stage, which is symbolized by the first day of creation in the story of Genesis in the Bible, we have to choose that. We can sit there for a very long time, before there's let there be light happening in our life. But it's never too. The flip side of that is never too late to start that.
Yeah.
The opposite happens in people who let themselves be reborn, though. Their rational plane gradually opens up, step by step. Their inner earthly plane comes under its control, and their outer earthly plane comes under the control of their inner earthly plane. The main period during which this happens is in early and full adulthood, then progressively to the end of their life, and afterward in heaven to eternity.
I get almost a military sense of hierarchy, of like when it's upside down, the wrong thing is in charge, and that's messing everything up on lower levels. And when he says, oh, this is in charge of, the rational is in charge of this inner earthly level is in charge of the outer earthly level. Now you're starting to get everything in the right order. You're getting an order in yourself. But amazing that he says that can happen in young adulthood, didn't it? It's like youth or something.
Yeah, that's right.
You don't have to be, I'm a late bloomer, but it's possible to,
You're like,
to do this. Or,
was it Billy Madison, where Adam Sandler has to go back? He's going through elementary school and it's an adult. We'll get there. So the process for which we were born is to develop from being like nothing all the way up until becoming an angel and continuing to develop into angelhood forever. The way that the process is meant to unfold is you go through and you're sort of on rails. In the beginning, everyone has a childhood that equips them for the next phase. You have an adolescence. But then at a certain point, when you start to become master of your own mind, the way you take the next step is just to start to pursue and live by the truth and use that truth to do things that are good.
Yeah, that's right. And I like the way he put it. I don't remember every word, but it said, let yourself be something. Let yourself be reborn. People who
the opposite happens in people who let themselves be reborn.
Let themselves be reborn. Yeah, so it's not like they rebirthed themselves. They signed the piece of paper. They said, okay, they signed the consent form. It says, okay, I will go through this process, because they don't know what's happening in the process. Swedenborg talks about that a lot. You know, they don't sit around thinking, oh, I think my inner earthly self just took control over my outer earthly. You know, no, we're just lost in what's going on. I don't know. I'm having thoughts. I'm having feelings. I don't know what's going on any more than a little baby who needs changing, you know, understands what's going on at that moment. They're just sort of unhappy and everything, and then they feel better but let yourself. But there is a decision in there to let this process happen. And I also think, from the way Swedenborg describes the days of creation that you brought up a little bit ago, that you can also opt out at various points. You can say, okay, that's enough. We got to here, but I don't want any more. This is getting to be a bit much for me. And other people like, no, I want to go the full process.